One. Welcome back to Dev Dive episode 24. As always, I'm your host, Nighthawk. Today, my guest is Amine, founder and Warchief of Science at Mobalytics. Welcome to the show, Amine. It's a pleasure to have you on tonight.
Hey, how's it going tonight? Pleasure to
It's
be
going
here.
good. It's great to have you on. You might be the one of the most distinguished guests we've had so far. So, wanted to
I
appreciate
don't
you
know
taking the
about
time.
that. I just play video games. uh,
So before we get into Mobalytics, because I think that's sort of like the meat and potatoes of the show tonight, why don't we talk a little bit more about your pre-Mobalytics career, what you did up until that point?
okay. Well, I was talking to you earlier a little bit. We were talking about overachieving family kind of situations, and I was telling you if you grow up as I come from a Lebanese family. Spent half my life in the U.S., half in Lebanon, and I, basically, my parents were very strict in school, and I had to have the highest grades in the class. But somehow my dad got us a Nintendo at 5, and I was 5, and I'm the oldest, and my other brother was 2, and we grew up on that, and I fell in love. And he only had two rules. One, basically, uh, you get top of the class grades. You can play as much as you want. And two, you have to finish the games I get you, or you can't get a new game. And for those of you who aren't young enough to have played games back in the days back then, games were really friggin' hard back then. And one of the first games we got happened till this day. I can't beat it, and I have no desire to beat it. It's the first Ninja Turtles game, so for anyone who's
Oh,
played that, it's just brutal. And after 6 months of trying to beat it, my dad set up a camcorder and recorded it while he was at work. And he came home and he said, "Okay, it looks like you guys put a lot of effort. I'll get you a new game." And we proceeded to beat every single game after that, like in a day or two. And so he made a new rule: either you finish the game or a month passes, whichever happens last,
later.
not first. Yeah, yeah. I don't know. Did you play any of those old Nintendo games that used to just
uh,
kick your butt?
I was on the very tail end. I'm the youngest, so I have all of the hand-me-downs coming in. So I got the tail
Yeah.
end of the NES.
Uh,
So I played Mario, played Duck Hunt.
yeah.
We had a lot of. I
Did
was
you
born
glue
into a very
the gun to the screen and like try and shoot stuff?
yeah. When I
And
was very little, yeah.
yeah, we had this uncle who could shoot it from across the living room, and it was like, I don't understand, why can't I do that? So I just glue it to the screen. Yeah.
There's a great video on how that actually works. It's super fascinating how the light gun actually can track that kind of thing. Because when you're a kid, you're like, oh, it's just you plug it in, that's how it goes. But when you grow up and you're
Oh,
like,
I
man,
gotta
this
look
is.
that up. Now I'm curious.
I'll link it to you after the show. I'll give you the basic rundown. So it takes a picture of the screen, and the way that the NES presented the game on the screen was it there's like a series of dots or something, or there's like a
Yeah.
tracing line going down the screen all the time. And it finds where that dot is based on your position of the gun, and that's how it like sort of locates where you're aiming. It's very low tech
Wow.
when you actually like get into it, but I love
But that was
solutions like that.
1984, man.
Yeah,
1985,
yeah.
whatever that was, dude. It's like, fuck,
Like
yeah, that's
it's
cool.
crazy how advanced like or how I love when engineers can take a very simple solution and solve a complex problem with it because I think those are like the most elegant solutions.
Yeah, I think engineers are defined by their ability to work within constraints.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
We
yeah.
have I don't have a ton of experience with engineers even though I love talking to them. But my favorite things is when they're happiest when they have unlimited resources, but they're most efficient when they have very limited resources.
Yeah, it's true. It's like you need those forcing functions, right? And kind of
Hmm.
like you see us do it to ourselves if we're even if we're not engineers. Like if you don't set up some kind of boundaries for, you'll procrastinate. You'll tend to go to infinity. You'll tend to you'll just not. But if all of a sudden there's a boundary constraint, you feel more focused and you kind of get it. And that's why a lot of people end up in school as crunchers at the end of the day because it's just so
Yeah,
much makes more sense, right? I have this deadline. Oh, just wait till it's time. But and so that's just how it
I'm
is.
definitely guilty of that.
Yeah, I think everyone is, unless you were one of those special kids who did everything you were told and or the way you were told, right? Yeah. but
Oh
that
yeah,
was not.
well, oh, sorry. I was just gonna say to get back on topic about old video games that I played. There was a game called Bible Buffet that I played
Never
growing
heard of
up,
it.
and it is the most ridiculous. Like it, you think with the name like Bible Buffet, it's supposed to be like this religious game or something like that, but it's just so random. It's like you play as Moses or something, and you go through the desert, and then like all this food comes down, and you're like supposed to catch the good
Really?
food. It's very weird. There's a LGR video about it, Lazy
I'm gonna
Game
look that
Review.
up. Holy shit!
Um,
Bible buffet? Are you
it's
kidding me?
so weird. Um, and this was when I was like maybe 4 or 5 years old, so the finer details of the game might have escaped me. But
There's
when
like
I was a
Pizza
kid,
Land and all these
yeah,
levels, Potato
it's
Land.
it was so odd. um,
Who made this game?
I'm I'm sure there's people out there who have fond memories of playing this as a child, but it was just on the cusp of my gaming interest, and I really had no idea what was going on. And it didn't traumatize me, but it
Wisdom
definitely
Tree,
didn't leave like a great experience in my brain for
Tucson
games.
County, Arizona. Wow, that's
Um,
so
yeah,
interesting. Wow.
th-
Anyway, that's funny.
there's a
Uh,
lot of very weird third party not bootleg, but just like definitely not Nintendo approved games out there
yeah,
for the NES.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, they had that seal. Actually, if you haven't read it, the book about Nintendo, the history of Nintendo, I'll find you the name. It's fascinating. They're why they decided to create the seal quality, all of that
mhm.
after the Atari crash dump. The history of video games is actually super fascinating. It's one of my favorite things to read about.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
but yeah, it was just like we love playing those hard games, and that's kind of I'll have to say I learned a lot more playing video games in my life than I have doing anything else, and that includes like times rating in games, playing competitive, anything like that. And so I'm really glad that they played a strong part in my early education. But the point is my parents drove us through school really like, and by the time I was 14, I had graduated high school, 14 going on 15.
Wow.
And at that point, my father asked me, "Do you want to be a doctor and engineer?" I'm like, "I'm 14. I don't know, but you have to pick something." And so I said, I'll be a doctor. I want to help people." And I did. I went to university and I did biology and I memorized every bone in the body, every muscle, and all of that. And I realized I was bored to death. And I spent most of my time playing Warcraft 3. I lived in Lebanon back then, and so I would spend all day in the cyber cafe playing with my friends and trying to be the best player. I was successful enough, but we'd play these big 3-on-3 games, and it was really fun. And I found that playing team games was a lot of fun and like getting everyone on the same page and winning. It's much more satisfying than just winning alone, right? I felt like it was just so cool. And I would sleep overnight and go up to classes at 8 in the morning while I was at the LAN cafe, just shit like that. That I would use an excuse to tell my dad I was sleeping out of the house. And point is, I went to med school. I decided it wasn't for me. I dropped out and I did biomedical engineering. I did a PhD in biomedical engineering. I thought it'd be cool. I can mix problem solving. Engineers solve problems, and I like solving problems. Most importantly, I thought I could build a gun arm like Barrett or Mega Man or Bionic Command or anything like that. I was like, just for people who've lost an arm, why not replace it with like a gun cannon? I thought that would be super cool until I took digital signal processing, which completely shot any desire I had to make anything with electric circuits. It just that was not my cup of tea, and I ended up really doing a PhD in World of Warcraft. If I'm being honest, I was playing WoW when that came out, like 16 hours a day. I would go into the lab at night, do my experiments, send in the results, and everything would be cool with the lab because I'd send in what I had to do, and I didn't have to. It was the most efficient way because I didn't have to talk to people. I didn't have to go to do to outside of the one lab meeting. I didn't have to do anything where it involved like small talk or whatever. I could just play WoW, and I played so much WoW that we eventually got sponsored by Fnatic, our arena team, and we did rating, and WoW was amazing. It taught me so much and was some of the funnest moments in my life. And I would play competitive games on and off a lot during my PhD. If you do a PhD, you have a lot of free time, but you're supposed to be working towards your thesis in your time, right? So if I do jack shit for 3 months, nobody pays attention except me. So I can do that, and then I can spend 3 months going hard. Eventually, I finished within 6 years, but I had gone through several games competitively. I had gone through um, WoW, StarCraft 2, League of Legends, Dawn of War, and I'd placed top in a lot of those. I was like seventh in beta and League of Legends on the ladder. I hit diamond in the StarCraft 2 beta. So it's top of the ladder in Dawn of War. Played well. Oh, so I love playing games competitively, and then I would just like go for a while and then stop, cold, work, go. Kind of that kind of cycle, right? And it was just games just provided such a nice sandbox to experiment, and you didn't need to get funding and all of that stuff. But my PhD was actually on human physiology, focused on neurophysiology, and so we were like injuring rats and trying to see how their spinal cord recovered. The whole injuring rats part, I couldn't, I didn't have the stomach
Oof.
for. We had a guy who
Yeah.
did it, but I it was fascinating. I spent a lot of time on a microscope, but what I was really interested in was in performance. And I did my postdoc, I focused on human performance physiology and what made people really good, right? And so while I was going to these tournaments and competing, I really wanted to figure out, like, I was so different from my teammates. I was very strategic, very analytical numbers. And I think we had like the best mage. I thought he was the best mage in the world at the time on our team. And he didn't do any of that kind of stuff that I did. He was just extremely strong instinct of what to do in the game. But he was very smart when you asked him why afterwards, right? He would explain his logic very clearly, but he just never, I never saw him like reading numbers or looking or doing any deep research. Like I would go to the people's armory, write down everything, make a plan, analyze, and this guy was just like, he knew what to do. Frostbolt, basically. All the other mages were sheeping the crowd control, and he was frostbolting. And I asked him why, and he explained. I was like, "That's really reasonable. I don't know why no one else does that." Right? And so, it was just, it was a really good time. And I started. I got burnt out of WoW. Like playing 16 hours a day. I did the high warlord grind. I did everything. I was just like, oh my god. And what I realized is I was really passionate about human performance, and I wanted to know what made all these players tick. So I went back and did my postdoc, and I focused specifically on a performance. I got lucky. I found a great mentor. He's like a second father to me today, and I'm very grateful that he was around to harness my misfitness. He had a collection of misfits, and I think it was one of the greatest groups I've ever worked with. And basically, we would explore the extremes of human physiology. So we worked with mountain climbers, fighter pilots, deep sea divers, extreme marathon runners, anything you can think of that's like out of the ordinary. And we worked with this explorer. His name was Mike Horn. This guy like kayaked around the world. He swam the Amazon River. He circumnavigated the Arctic Circle with a sled like behind his back. Like just these insane people with a tremendous amount of mental toughness and for some of them physical adaptations, right? And so it was just a great time to learn, and a lot of the projects I was doing were focused on Air Force. Now before I did that, like when I finished my PhD, I had applied to Riot right when they were just coming out, and I wanted a game designer, and I went through the entire interview position. I got asked to analyze a champion that they made, like a mock champion, and it had mana burn. Now, I didn't think mana burn was bad, but Riot has a strict no mana burn policy because it's anti-fun. And so we had a discussion about that. I still remember it today in the interview. I didn't get the gig. It
That's
was
incredible to me. Sorry to cut you off, but
yeah.
you I think honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, I think Riot really missed like a massive opportunity there. You seem like you would be such a fantastic like asset to early Riot. Just going back and thinking about like where that company how that company has gone, like where they've come from and where they are now. It just seems like somebody that you with like in the part of the old guard and designing champions and tweaking stuff. I don't know. I don't know a ton about champion
I feel
design
like
and
I
stuff like
missed a
that.
huge opportunity because if you were part of the old guard, you would have had a lot of good stock. But
Yeah.
it happens. I actually later on after my postdoc of 4 years, I interviewed again at Riot, and I went in for a scientist position. I did through the whole gamut, and I didn't get that either. And so I twice went through, and I always wanted to get into the gaming field. Is what I'm saying. I tried to apply to Blizzard, get into Blizzard. I would make mock-ups, analysis. I would just send them. I was an annoying pest sending stuff, trying to say, "Hey, please hire me. I don't know. I'll do whatever. I'll figure it out. I'm willing to learn, and I'm eager." And I just couldn't get in. And I was really enjoying my work with the human performance. Like we got to climb Mount Everest, we got to climb Kilimanjaro
Wow.
for work. Those were experiences that fundamentally changed my core belief system and the way I viewed the world. It's fascinating how small our own bubble is. And one of the things that I got to work on, probably the most notable project that was under my hood, was Air Force project. And basically back then, I don't know if you've ever heard of the F-22 fighter jet. It
I
basically
have.
had, yeah, so they grounded the whole fleet back like 7, 8 years ago because there was an incident of hypoxia in Alaska and a plane kind of went down and it's 25 million down the drain. So they're like, okay, let's figure out what's going on here. Let's put in some money. So we would go outfit the pilots with gear, monitor their vitals when they're in the air, do all that stuff, and try and figure out like, hey, what what's going on? And we realized we don't know enough with these new fighters and their dynamic flight profile. And so we got a grant for a bunch of in-lab experiments, and one of them was testing people cognitively, basically making them play a video game as they were hooked up. One that we created, a simple box clicking game. They're hooked up to like 20 different physiologic signals from EEG to ECG, measuring heart, blood, stress levels, oxygen saturation, and we would make them pass out while doing it, like borderline pass out. And safe, totally safe. We tested on ourselves while playing, and we'd monitor their performance metrics and see like what are some trending indicators that can help us understand when someone's starting to degrade. And I was really fascinated. And then I got this idea, let me go out and let me talk to the professional teams and see if anyone's willing for me to monitor their players and try and see how we can improve their performance. Luckily, Steve from Team Liquid, who's a great friend today, was crazy enough to say, hey, come on out here, give it a try. So I packed this $60,000 eye tracker that belonged to the lab. My boss said, cool, go, just as long as you get your work done. Flew out there over the weekend on my dime, slept on their couch, tested their players. Like I was holding this eye tracker in my lap as a carry-on because I was so scared to lose it. Like I was petrified, right? And I tested their players and I published a couple of videos, and that's what led me to like apply to Riot a second time because there were so many interested people, and it didn't work out. And so I really loved what I did, but I was in Rochester, Minnesota for about 11 years, and so I was at the Mayo Clinic up there, great place to learn, and so many smart people at the pinnacle of their field. But I was like, I don't want to do medicine anymore. Like
Mhm.
I want to figure out what I want to do, and I want to get back into gaming. I love what I'm doing with the lab, but I just want to broaden my horizon. So I took like a sabbatical and I started to do a bunch of different things. One of them was working with an investment firm out of Greece, and the other one was traveling a lot and living nomad. I left the house at 18. My parents are from Lebanon. I went back, lived with my parents for a bit. But during this cycle, I ran into my co-founder, who I didn't even know back then, at TwitchCon. We were both at an esports panel, and he basically asked the question, "Hey, what about Moneyball for esports?" I'm like, dude, that's just like analyzing data. Let's not use fancy words. So I pulled him aside and said, hey, we started talking. And he said, like, I saw your work. Why don't you just use the data from the game and basically say, okay, hey, this is what you need? Because the average player doesn't need that much, right? They need just enough to tell them what they're doing right or wrong. So I basically, we tried it. We started like a really started Mobalytics. He had kind of started it before, but he didn't know exactly what he was doing. So we hammered out the first concept and started to work on it in my free time. It was fun. I loved data and analyzing and trying to figure out and peg play styles and do stuff. And we were going to do a Kickstarter. It wasn't a, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Real quick, this was how long ago was this? When did
This
Mobalytics
was
first come around?
2015. So I met
2015.
him
Okay.
2015. Yeah, 2015, the first TwitchCon. And we basically just, I was doing it for fun. And we met once in Greece and hammered out like a structure. And he kind of, I was going on an expedition for work to Kilimanjaro, and he entered us into TechCrunch at the time. I had no idea what TechCrunch was or that he did it. And we talked about doing a Kickstarter. And when you go up a mountain, you disappear. You go off the radar for 2 weeks. The best part. It's like it's I need to go off the radar pretty soon probably, but I can't recommend it more to anyone. Just like lose all electronic stuff for 2 weeks. Don't see an email, don't see a text message, not a single Discord or Slack ping. It's just beautiful. It reminds you of like what being a person is. And I came down and I saw like 500 messages from him, and he's a quiet type. He barely messages and anything. And I was so confused. So I called him and I said, like, "Hey, what's going on, man?" He's like, "Dude, where have you been?" I was like, "I was on a mountain. There's no phones there." He's like, "Oh, okay. We got accepted into TechCrunch and we have to present on stage and you have to fly to San Francisco like within a week." I said, "No way, dude. I have a safari booked. I'm here. I just got down. I want to relax and enjoy." And he's like, "Dude, this is so important." I'm like, "What is TechCrunch?" And he told me, like, are you familiar with TechCrunch? Just in case the viewers
I
don't
am.
know, it's one of the biggest startup competitions, the biggest in the world, right? I didn't know that at the time. I was just like, whatever. And so I said, "Okay, I'll get over there." And I went there, and like I just went. We just went, presented for fun. We entered at the he entered at the 11th hour, basically like 30 minutes before the deadline, and basically he and we got accepted, and then we ended up winning the whole thing. Like we had our poster that said coming to a Kickstarter near you, and we ended up winning the whole thing. And then it was quite the experience. And all of a sudden, oh, we had money being like, hey, thrown our way. And so we have a real company now, and we're building and we're creating our product. And it's been a roller coaster ride since then, and it's been crazy. And I've got to meet all these amazing people along the way, and it's come with its ups and its downs, and it's been really, really cool.
That is such a fascinating story, and to go back a little bit into it, it makes me
Yeah.
feel a lot better about being. I've also applied to Ride a couple times for a few different
Uh-huh.
roles, and it makes me feel a lot better that if I wasn't accepted, and if you weren't accepted, that makes me feel like okay, well, maybe they're just very selective about who they
I
bring
don't
on.
even know if it's like there's a lot of different factors, right? And I think I've started to learn this as you get into once you have to hire people yourself, right? It's
Hmm.
like you're looking for something specific sometimes for a role, and you have a lot of good candidates that come in. It has nothing to do with you sometimes, and it's just like the factors there. Like this person has the experience we specifically need that fills this hole in our team, and it seems like the better pick for this team, right?
Yeah,
While this person might be great and might be overall a plus one, but just for what we need right now for the team, it's just not the better bet, right? Like something like that. So it's just there's a lot of different things that go on there. I don't.
definitely. So
But definitely
dialing
shouldn't feel
in.
bad about it, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Going off on a small tangent right now, applying to jobs, and I'm lucky to be in a job right now where it's fairly stable. Applying jobs is just a very stressful. It's a stressful time in your life, especially if you don't have something going for you. A lot of the times you're waiting, you're freaking out about interviews, you're freaking out about how you did on previous interviews, and if you don't have anything else going on, if you're just like playing video games, like I did when I before I got my job, um, it can psych you out a bit. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'd love to have more of the insight from the recruiter's point of view because I feel like everyone has that insight coming in as an applicant. I'd love to hear more about like what's somebody thinking on the other side of the desk, when, like where are they coming from. But we can talk about that a bit later because I don't want to get too
I'm
far off
happy to
track.
talk about it now if we're
But
if
that's
we're here, the
fascinating.
topic's up. Yeah. I try and be extremely empathetic to the person coming in, right? I think I know because I have people close to me who are kind of in the situation you described, and I can see how hard it is, and it kind of it wears on them. Um, I think uh, the thing that you're looking for, that I look for the most, is passion. How much do you care about our product and what we build? And why? Why do you want to do it? What's important? Then after that, there's like probably other people, not me, who do the technical assessment because I'm more focused on like, are you going to be great with us, right? And is there a path for you? Can you grow, right? I think. And then so it's usually a cumulative decisions like this person is passionate and this person is very technical and this person can launch a program and lead and this person can do this, right? And you have to pick like which ones are the most important for is if it's a lead position, then obviously they need to have like like you have to be able to feel that they can be a lead, not that they think they're ready to be a lead, but you have to feel from the questions you ask, like, can you lead a team? Like basically like by using different uh questions, you try and understand like, okay, what would they do in this Yeah, how would they lead this team in this position? Like, what have they done in the past that makes them a good leader? Right? How do they answer those kind of questions? Right? So you're trying to figure out what's the best fit, really. But the most important thing, I think, if you really want to do something and you just keep trying to do that something, it's like one day the luck is going to strike, right? You have to create those opportunities to get yourself lucky, and you just can't feel like bummed out because you didn't, right? It's just you gotta enjoy kind of what it is you're doing in the process, which seems like, it's a good habit to have something that you enjoy that builds you up to that place. Like I mean, I skipped a lot of the parts in my story besides the interview failure. Like I started like 2 different product companies and they were just absolute messes and for hundreds of reasons, but but I learned so much, right? And I didn't think about it much that day. It's so easy for me to come here and tell you my story from A to B, and it looks like a nice line, but really it looked like something like that, and then it ends up and it's you make it look real nice for the camera, but it's not. It's nothing like that. You don't even know that your story's going here when you're here. I never thought I would start a company. If you told me 6 years ago, would I start a company with 2 Ukrainian friends as co-founders? I didn't even know any Ukrainian people. I didn't even think about starting a company, right? So it's just, you just got to leave yourself open to the possibilities and just apply your full effort in a positive way towards it. That's all.
That's some great advice. How this is probably going to be a question that's like you can't really answer it quantitatively, but do you know going into an interview after a certain amount of time, do you have like a good feeling about somebody? You're like, oh, I think that guy will be a great fit for a job. Like 10 minutes, 20 minutes in.
So I will say that I get an initial impression at the start. And I tell myself to shut the fuck up and let that impression alone, and I just try and pay attention to the person because it's we always come into everything with preconceived biases. So
Hmm.
it's so important. Like the person could be nervous, the person could be not someone who easily opens up, and so it's just important to just listen and be present and give that person the room to express themselves, and you can write down whatever your preconceived thing is on a paper so you leave it behind while you're in the interview and just let it play out, and then make the decision later. But I think it's so important not to. And sometimes you're right, your preconceived bias is right, and it gets better as it can, depending on how you check yourself. You get either better at initial assessments or you get worse, and you just snowball your biases. So if you learn to control for your biases, you keep getting like better at checking yourself, right? So I think that it's just important not to judge really fast. I think it's very, very important.
That's awesome. I love to hear like I love these perspectives because I would never think about this in a million years. Just coming in from the recruitment perspective, from the person who is going in for a job.
I guess I have a lot to say about it because the last 3 months I've spent interviewing and we've been hiring a lot. So it's been a lot. Like I've been doing. There was a month where I was doing 6 interviews a day the whole month, and it's just
How
like
big
it
is
was.
Mobalytics right now? How, in terms of
So we're at
employees?
50 people right now, well over
Wow,
50. Yeah,
that's
we went from
amazing.
30 to over 50 in the last 6 months, and the last 5 months, 3 to 4 months.
Mostly hiring engineers and developers, or
Yeah, a lot of engineering hires, but also like, we hired a few people on our content team. We hired a few people in just different places, game expert team, that kind of stuff.
that's awesome.
Yeah, but
Um,
mostly engineering.
yeah, I feel like engineering. I should have been an engineer. That's what I think every time I look back. Seems to be a good field to be in right now. Um,
Yeah, right now, yeah, software engineering is a good field to be in.
I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Why don't we take a step back and we talk about some of like the important skills and techniques that you learned when you were back in biomed?
Well, you know, what I stressed on at the start was I felt like I learned more playing games competitively,
Hmm.
but I think the things I learned doing my PhD and my postdoc is a digging really deep into something. Like, for a PhD, you have to be the number one expert in that little sub niche that you're doing. So basically the title of my thesis was the effect of neuregulin on phrenic motor neurons in spinal hemisection. I forgot the entire title, but it's a long one like that. But it's basically the effect of a certain neurotrophic, one variant of a neurotrophic factor on the certain type of motor neuron that's found in the spinal cord of the rat. So you have to become like a really big expert on that little topic and anything associated with that topic. And you have to learn how to present information in a very clear way to people and to back that up with specific facts and to argue your rationale and your logic and convince people why you have a chance of being right, right? And learn to take really difficult questions. I think the biggest learning moment that I had during my was when I failed. I'd always done pretty well in school, so the first time I failed something was like, holy shit, I was blown away. It was a big moment for me. I was very affected by it. Um, I failed my first oral qualification exam, and basically, what an oral qualification exam is you come into a room, you've got the committee, and you have to present kind of a topic to them. It wasn't my thesis; it was just like a topic that I've been working on for the last 3 months. And then they can ask you all sorts of questions, and they can go off on all sorts of tangents. And they're not looking for the right answers. What they're looking for is your logic and to see how you deconstruct the argument and how you try and make assumptions. And I grew up in our culture, you're not supposed to say I don't know. Everyone should know everything. If you go visit like Lebanon, everyone is a PhD in everything. Your uncle wants to tell you how to run a company. Your grandma wants to tell you how to live your life. Everyone wants to tell you everything because they know everything. And so I learned from that meeting, I got so thrown off and I learned to say, I don't know. I learned to handle that kind of pressure. I learned to present my arguments, super valuable. And now whenever we're working in a place, I love to, not in a mean way, but I love to tear down people's logic and help them rebuild it because I really think that you reach really good solutions when you farm for dissent. Basically look for why you're wrong. Don't look for why you're right, but look for why you're wrong. It's I've learned to really like the feeling of being wrong because that means that I can learn a lot more here and that there was someone who is smart who was able to say, hey, this is wrong, let's do it like this, and to articulate that logic makes me feel safe, right? But if everyone is saying, hey, you're right, and it's right, I feel very scared. It's like, what are we missing? What angle are we not seeing here, right? So
It's
I
almost
think
like
that
things
that's
are
super
going too
important.
well, and you're just like,
Yeah, yeah,
something,
yeah.
something's,
Maybe that makes me
something's up.
paranoid. Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's the most valuable lesson I learned. After that oral committee meeting, I had like a paper with all their comments, and I put
Hmm.
it on my bathroom mirror, and I would see it every morning, and it would remind me like of kind of like what my mistakes were until like I had them burned into my brain, and it didn't bother me anymore, and so then I could take it down and be a normal person again.
That's awesome. I wanted to say, you are so far a fantastic public speaker. Would you credit that towards your PhD path, or is that something you've learned since then?
I think I've always had a big mouth. So I think it's kind of been helpful there, but definitely my PhD and postdoc, I had to present at many conferences and
Hmm.
talk. So somehow I ended up being, and I think like it's not it's the chicken or egg thing. I don't know, but I always got like after we finished like a big project, like our Everest project was super fascinating for a lot of people. So a lot of public speaking got requested, and boss in the lab would always send me to go do it. So I think in 1 year I talked like at 60 different things. So I got a lot of practice really fast, and I learned like not to to whatever you're gonna make a mistake, people are gonna laugh at you. It's okay. I remember my first time I talked in front of 400 people. I was like, at the start of every public speaking, whether that's TechCrunch, whether that's whatever, I get like, but as soon as you say that first word, it's like
Hmm.
it goes down into your stomach and gets swollen. That's it. Everything's done. You just go into that flow and you don't see the world anymore. It's just like you're in the zone, right? But that first time I just narrowed in. I saw my advisor and he was in the audience, my thesis advisor, and he was Dr. Seek, and he was sitting there and he was just nodding. And I saw him and I zeroed in on his face, and out of the 400 people, all I saw was his face just nodding. And I had practiced it, so you have to practice. And I had practiced it so many times, it just came out, and I was just focused, zeroed in on his face. And I won't ever forget that, the lights and everything. But thank you. I'm glad you think I'm a good public speaker. I think it's just a lot of practice and just learning to deal with that uncomfortable feeling at the start and just knowing that it's normal and just like I don't know if you queue up for a ranked game in league, it's your promotions, you get that heartbeat, and you got
Yeah,
to just play the game. Maybe at the start you're cold, but as soon as the game starts, you can't feel that anymore. You just got to be in the zone, or you'll never perform, right? You'll never
it's
get into the
it's
zone.
It's awesome that you bring that up because I actually get that feeling when I do the podcast, and this is a very very low stakes environment for everyone involved. It's not a ton of audience. There's never a ton of people coming in and heckling you or anything like that. But I still get that little bit of it's. I hesitate to call it stage fright because there's no stage, but
Hmm.
you get that feeling, or I get that feeling when I come into this. And then, like you said, when you start the show, when you actually get things going, you're like, oh, it becomes more natural. Things
It's
just
all it
flow.
goes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's great that you bring that up because I definitely feel like
Flow is a
that.
fascinating subject. If you're interested in reading more, there's so many good books about that that I can recommend after the show. One of my
Definitely.
favorites is The Art of Learning. It's about this guy named Josh Whiteskin, I think is I don't know how to pronounce his last name. It's hard. And he was a chess champ in the US at the age of 16, grandmaster champion. They were saying is like the next Bobby Fischer. And he went from that to disappearing from the chess scene to becoming a master Tai Chi martial artist, winning a competition.
Wow.
And just he talks about that state of learning something and performing. And it's really, really nice.
That's awesome. This is like the weirdest not the weirdest, but this is like the lowest stakes tangent we can go off of from that. But I just started watching this show on Netflix called Queen's Gambit and something like that. But it
Ooh,
mentions
I heard it's good.
Bobby
Is it
Fischer.
good?
It's pretty good so far. I'm only 5 or so episodes in, but I really like the cinematography and the lead actress. She's very good at what she does. So I don't have a ton of interest in chess, honestly. I'm not that type of person, but they make it interesting and they don't over focus on the technicals, which I think is important when you're trying to draw in a wide audience. So
A
maybe
lot of the
chess
guys in our
nerds.
company are playing chess. They're liking it now. Yeah, it's
I
getting
feel like,
popular.
and
TSM
this,
picked up a chess player.
yeah, yeah, I saw that. It's
Yeah.
shoot, I don't even remember his name, but I did see that. Um, but I feel like there's sort of a chess renaissance happening right now, and of course this could just be my very small perspective, like sort of panning over and seeing chess being popular again. But I feel like more and more people, it's becoming more of a something that people are interested in, young people especially. And I think that's amazing that we can live in the world with such complicated games like League of Legends, which is literally one of the most complicated video games ever. Um, and you have this game that's been around for thousands and thousands of years, still being a major drive and a major attraction for young people. I
Let
always
me
thought
ask you a
that's
question. Do you
fascinating.
think we'll have a game that's around in 1,000 years that exists today?
You mean like a video game or like
Yeah.
a sport? I don't think so,
No, video game.
honestly.
You don't think
I
so?
think I think that games have evolved so quickly, and I think it's absolutely mind-boggling that a game like League of Legends has been around and popular, most popular game in the world for 11 years. I think that's really speaks volumes to Riot's ingenuity and their dedication to keeping the game fresh. Because if you look at, I mean, you played League of Legends back in beta. Would you be playing that game that in that form 10 years later? Probably
I mean,
not. Maybe.
the
I don't
game
know.
has changed so much.
I know.
Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to dissociate the different forms, but you're right, right? Like it's just evolved so nicely over time, you know?
I would I would hesitate to say that in even 100 years we would have a game that would be unchanged, fundamentally unchanged after all that time. I just think that it's not that sort of environment, and that's the nice thing about video games is they thrive on change, especially these more popular online games that we've been patronizing for the past 10 years or so.
I mean, I would
um
argue that if I had to name a game, it would be Tetris. I could see
okay,
that being
yeah,
played 200-300 years later, right? But
I could agree with you there. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of Tetris. Maybe it's because I didn't really grow up on it. I just sort of missed it. But I have friends who still play all the new Tetris games that come out that are just still at its core. It's just Tetris.
it's just
Um,
Tetris, yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah,
that's
I don't know.
interesting.
I wonder where will there be a MOBA in 20 years? That's such an interesting question, right?
I don't know. I think Riot's answer would be yes. I think if
Yeah.
you asked a Fortnite player, they would say no. I think if you asked a chess gamer, they'd be like, I hate video games. I
Yeah.
just want to play
Yeah.
chess. I don't
Yeah.
know. I hope that there's MOBAs because I enjoy MOBAs, but maybe I'll enjoy something else in 20 years if I'm
Yeah,
still gaming.
yeah. It's an interesting question. Very, very, very interesting question.
I can ask you this because you were gaming pretty intensely 20 years ago. Did you think you were going to play the type of games 20 years ago for 20 more years, or do you think that you were
Well,
looking
World of
to?
Warcraft is almost 20 years old. What are
Mhm,
we at? 16 almost, right?
a long time, yeah, and it's
Yeah,
still at its
16.
core. It's still
Yeah.
World of Warcraft. I would say WoW has changed a lot less than something like League of
League.
Legends has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, like, WoW is still like you can go back and play WoW Classic now, and you can see like,
and people do.
it's so funny when I started playing WoW, the guys in our guild were from EverQuest. They said, "Man, this is such a watered down EverQuest. You guys don't even know what it's like to have it hard." And today on retail, we tell people, "Man, you guys should have played WoW when it first came out. That shit was like annoying and grindy and hard, right?" So it's like as we streamline stuff, but there was something magical about the initial leveling and world of the World of Warcraft. The journey was the destination back then, and now
Mhm.
we're in all these funneled systems. And we were talking about this in the company. I think Destiny is the most amazing example of a job, right? Like a game, but it's fun. But it's like, you've got all of these things that you feel like you have control over, that you have to do, that you fall behind if you don't do. And they're all integrating in the right way, in the right pieces, so that you can be completely engaged. But if the gameplay wasn't so tight, it would just be a treadmill, right? But
Mhm.
it's actually a super fun game, right? But they've gotten so good at that stuff. I think we've forgotten what it's like to just play a game, right? Like without
Yeah.
any sort of extrinsic value. Like nobody played Super Mario World to have the fastest speed run or to be on Twitch or to do something. They just played Super Mario. Oh, and I fell down this hole and oh, I found this thing here. That's so cool, right? Like, there was a lot more sense of wonder and exploration. And today, like even stronger in the mobile space, where games like have like the onboarding is so clear. Do X. It's like you're doing
Yeah.
to-do lists, right?
It's a task list.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I feel sinister even saying this, but I feel like, especially like you said in some of the mobile instances, we sort of enter and I'm going to butcher this because obviously you're familiar with this sort of thing. Like it's almost like a Skinner box,
Hmm.
where it will just be. It feels like it's preying on human psychology, and I hate to accuse any game developer of doing it, and I won't specifically accuse anybody, but I've seen this sort of trend, and obviously, as a layperson in science and stuff like that, I'm sure you're cringing at me, but
No, no.
um, it's it's almost it feels predatory, and I don't like
It
it.
is predatory. It's
And
designed to be predatory. A lot of these, there's quite a few of them that are designed to be predatory.
mhm. And
Like nobody thinks like EA's FIFA system is for the good of mankind, do they?
yeah, I don't know. I'd like to think that, but I know people who are very into those things and they don't have a problem with it. They're aware. The worst part is that they're aware of it. They know that it's predatory and they know that
But
it's
the
causing
person
them
in
to.
the playing in the casinos in Las Vegas doesn't have a problem with it either,
Yeah.
right? Like it doesn't mean that they're not being taken advantage of, right?
Hmm.
It's
It's
just
a it's
like
a it's a pro. I don't know. Is it my problem to solve? No. Is it a
not mine
problem?
either.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's frustrating to me though. And that's like a very big tangent away from what we were originally talking about.
Yeah,
But
it's a difficult. I mean, as we get more and more data and more, it's like this is one of the most difficult parts about what we do, right? We genuinely want to help people with our platform to improve, right? The problem is that people will tell you, "Hey, I want to improve," but much like someone who is wants to be more fit, everybody wants to be more fit. Tell them, "Hey, what you need to do to be more fit is you need to go to the gym. You need to do these 5 exercises. Can you do that?" 50% say, "Hey, I ain't doing that," right? Then out of the 50% who do it, you tell them you have to do this every day for the next month, and then you have to make it part of your life. Most of them will drop out before the month is even over. And you're left with this small subset. That's the same thing with the people playing the games, right? Everybody wants to be challenger and really good. Okay, you focus on farming. Stop telling me to focus on farming. But dude, really, if you farm, you get more gold, you get more items, you win. So just farm. If you hit every creep, you're going to do really good. And, and it's just so what we realize is that we need to use some of these tricks in a way to make people feel better about the different things that they have to grind and do to reach their goal, right? And so sometimes it is done for good, but there's always a line, and it's very scary, right? You don't want to look into the abyss too deep, right? And so it's just it keeps you up at night.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm glad that I'm not in a position where I'm in charge of making that decision because I think that it would be very easy to go from point A to point B when money starts being on the line. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
At the end
It's
of the day, you're
scary.
also a business, right? Like, and then
Yeah,
gamers choose to pay for specific things, and so you've got to figure out how to do that, right? Yeah,
yeah.
that's a struggle. You want to offer as much value, as focus on offering as much value as possible, right? But now people have become used to paying in a specific way. You
Yeah.
know, it's like that
Mhm.
last part of the in-game currency that I don't have, so I can buy the whole new $10 in-game, right? So people have become trained to behave in certain ways from free to not free, what they expect to be free, what they not. So, so like, we talked about this the other night while playing Destiny, but it's like it takes teams forever to build something,
Mhm.
but it takes a person a fraction of that time to consume that, right? And so it's like sometimes it's difficult to understand. Like, I think we can go off another tangent here. I've been into the Destiny subreddit for a while
Uh-huh.
since Beyond Light came out, and the YouTube video culture scene, and there is a big movement of like Beyond Light is way too expensive, and we're not getting the
Mhm.
value we got from Taken King, and like they're doing all these comparisons. And on one hand, they're right, but on another hand, it's like I mean, I guess what if the cost of making something has gone up? What if all these other factors have gone in, right? And so it's do you not think the actual thing is worth it anymore? Then I mean, you are free to stop playing, but like how much do you want to be free and how much do you not want to pay for? I think it's really hard to understand those things. I don't know, what do you think about you've been playing Destiny more than I have. What do you think about the value of the latest expo?
And this is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Actually, I've been watching a lot of content about it as well. And I love the idea that nobody ever thinks about Shadowkeep or the previous expansion. Nobody ever thinks like, oh man, that was great value for $40. They always want to compare Beyond Light to a previous one and they're like, oh man, this is so much less than what I got for $40 back then. But
Yeah.
what if instead of you're getting less for the same amount, maybe before you just got more for a lower amount of money? Like who's to say that $40 wasn't reasonable for maybe it should have been $60, maybe it should have been whatever. And that's when you start encountering all these weird issues with monetization in these live service games because like is it based on the cost of what it takes to produce? Is it based on what people are going to pay? Is it based on how to fund future projects for your company, how to fund more popular things versus least popular things? For me, I originally when I first purchased Beyond Light, I was a little curious because it felt like they were charging more, like you said, for a less amount of content. That's what people thought. But playing the game and experiencing it, I don't feel like I was overcharged for a less amount of content. I'm a little bummed that they removed things. I'm a little bummed that we lost the last 3 years or so of content from the Destiny world. But I don't blame the price point for that. It's just one of those things that you experience when you're playing it.
It's
Does
so
that make sense?
interesting, right?
I hope that was clear.
Yeah. No, it made perfect sense. It's a really good way of looking at it. And I think that the other thing that we forget about is we always see everything through our own lens. And then the people who are making the game are like, what about the person who's just starting now? It's
Hmm.
so overwhelming to have all of these things to do. So how do we bring them into it, right? And so
Hmm.
that's probably where like I think probably I've read a couple of things. Probably the sunsetting could have been done better, but man, it's really hard to make decisions when you don't know what's going to happen. And it's very easy to do a retrospective and say, "Hey, we fucked up all these things," right? So it's always easier when you're not making something, right? And
Yeah.
it's great. All the criticism helps comes from a place of passion and helps to make something better. We see that. I can't tell you how many times we see that with our own product, right? And we really
Hmm.
appreciate it and we say, "Hey, please bring it on," right? but I've learned to feel less and less bad about it. At the beginning, I would be mortified and stay up all night, and I'd get sick reading some of the harsher criticism. And now it's just like, well, that's a good point. Or well, I know why we can't do that right now. Okay. And so I can be okay with it, right?
Yeah. And I think it's great how you explained about like the new player perspective coming in, because I was actually watching a video from Dado Does Destiny, who has been a content creator for Destiny
Yeah, I
forever
know
since the
data.
game came
Yeah.
out. And he was talking about the new player experience in this video, and he said this is a great experience for new players. They're really going to come in and know what's going on, and it's great for people who don't really have friends who play Destiny who can't explain what's happening. Um, but I actually have a friend who started playing Destiny with Beyond Light, um, and like after a couple hours, he messaged me. He's like, "What the heck am I supposed to do? I have no idea what's going on. I'm stuck in this little thing." So I'm like, "Okay, stream your game. I'll see what's going on. I'll explain where you're supposed to go next." And he was just like stuck in the corner of the Cosmodrome, just shooting things because he didn't really see the little diamond showing where he's supposed to go next. So I thought that was
I
so.
got 2 or 3 people into it, and they're like, "Ah, I'm a little lost." I'm like, "Oh, man." It's so easy for us to see our own perspective and
Yeah.
bias. It's amazing,
And
right?
it was hilarious to me that Dado could go in and be like, "Oh, the new player experience is great," because obviously he's been playing the game for 8 years now or however long. So he knows
Yeah.
it like the back of his hand. He couldn't even begin to see the issues with the game because obviously it's not his fault. I mean, I couldn't see them either, but um, getting that new player perspective is always valuable. And I'm sure Bungie brought in a lot of people to play test for the new player experience. So I don't know if they just didn't hit the mark, or maybe my friend's just exceptionally bad at video games. But
You never know. Yeah. No,
yeah, I don't
it's
know.
so
It's interesting.
important. It's hard to get good perspectives a lot, and it's also I think it's become increasingly hard for developers to articulate their logic and decision making because it
Hmm.
becomes like kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. And so the risk reward curve is starts to get really difficult for them. And I've seen a lot of companies like do less and less, right? And that's my impression anyway. It feels like that's what always happens. And the places where people are giving the feedback, sometimes it's more like retaliation, and it's a good feedback if they take it that way. But it's like it usually it's the louder people, the angrier people who speak up the most, and they're coming
Hmm.
from a place of passion too, which is really important. But it becomes really hard to say something that feels uh, 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 meaningful, right? And I think there are some people who do it really well, and they continue to do it really well. But I can understand why sometimes it's extremely stressful because I mean, it's got to feel bad when you spent like the last year crunching something and working hard, and someone says like, "This is shit." Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just hard. And so I think there's important to see both perspectives of the story.
Especially coming in from this year, which I assume is where most of the development of Beyond Light came in, because the transition from being in an office environment to being working from home, which most companies had to deal with. I know you said before the show, I think it was on our initial call, Mobalytics has always been sort of like this remote
Hmm.
structured company. So obviously
Yeah.
you had a great transition into this world because there wasn't really much of a transition. But a lot of these games companies, especially, they had to go from people going into an office and working together and working in this environment to all of a sudden being cut off entirely from that. And we've talked at length because, of course, we've been in this situation for 8 months now or something like that. And it not everyone can do it. Not everyone knows how to transition at least at 100% efficiency. So that's also something you have to take into account when you're looking at any products that are coming out in this time space. And of course, is that the consumer's fault or is that consumer's problem? No, but is it something that they should ignore? I don't know. It's
Hmm.
it's hard. It's difficult
Yeah.
because you don't want to let your expectations slide and just have like an inferior product be acceptable because obviously you want your game to
Hmm.
be the best that it can be. But you also have to be realistic with how the workflow is actually changing. And I don't
Hmm.
know, not something that the average gamer is going to even spend a
It's not
second
it's not
thinking
his
about.
job to think about. It's not. He just
Yeah,
wants to
yeah,
play a good, or she just wants to play a great game, and that's it.
yeah,
And that's their right, right?
yeah. It's weird. And that's like that's sort of the I don't want to ever be the person who be like criticism this all this harsh criticism is undeserved because they're dealing with this, this, and this. And I feel like if you start taking that route, you'll just become, to use Reddit's term, an apologist for that company. You'll just be uh, excusing every mistake and everything. But I also feel like people go way too far, and I'm sure you've experienced this and you've seen this for every game out there, for League of Legends, for Destiny, where people will just like they'll say like this is the worst this is the worst year in Destiny so far, to use in a specific example. This is the least content we've gotten for our money. And I'm like you said, it's always your choice. You can stop playing this. It's not
Mhm.
You're not required to keep playing it. I don't know. It's difficult. Is it their choice? Should they stop playing because they don't like it anymore? Probably, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's. I think at the end of the day, you have to realize when it is your choice and when it isn't, right? And if something is bringing you, like, I remember after I did the high warlord grind, I had to step back and understand what the, like I'm burnt out. Why am I doing this 16? And then I felt like I was falling off a treadmill, like I was falling behind. I started to learn, like, okay, whenever I get that feeling, it's time to leave.
Hmm.
And so I've done that for every game, and I'll just stop. And I try to disconnect myself from the rewards. Like if the reward is going to allow me to do higher tier content that I want to do, then I have to get it. And do I have the time to commit to that? If I don't, then I cannot do the higher tier content. So I should stop playing if that's what brings me joy from this game. And so somehow someone has to come to terms with what is okay for them and what is not, and they need to
Hmm.
draw that line for themselves. And if you don't, then you will find yourself constantly a slave of your impulses rather than and the game's systems rather than your own joy, right? So, I mean, if you're having fun, then don't even think. Just have fun. If you're not, then you need to start to understand what can I be doing that's more fun for me.
Yeah, and that's an exercise in self control that I feel like people have just lost the ability to do that. Where it's like if you're not enjoying this video game anymore, stop playing it. Um, to use League as an example again, there's so many people who I see, even in my friend groups, who are like, I really hate this game. I really hate the that I
Yeah.
am addicted to League of Legends. And I'm like, well, it's if it is an addiction, and I don't want to get into the scientific and philosophical um part of that because I'm not qualified to talk about it at all. But if it is an addiction, isn't it your responsibility to wean yourself off and to cut yourself off and stop this negative aspect of your
Or to ask
life,
for help, right?
or to
Like
ask for help?
even you don't
Yeah.
have to do it yourself, right? Just say, hey, like I hate League, I can't stop. Th- And do you know anyone who that's happened with, and can they help me? Like I
Hmm.
think there's plenty of us who have that story. We've all gone through it, right? When we're don't want to play a game anymore, but we feel like we're compelled to play. And then one day we manage to make that jump and figure out that these are things that are more important to me, right? Everyone does that, and you hear it all the time. And I've interviewed so many engineers in the last 3 months, and they always, since we interview a lot of people from the CIS regions, they play a lot of Dota there. And they all tell me, man, I played a lot of Dota. I could have used your tool for Dota, but I stopped because I wanted to become a good engineer, right? But I've heard that story at least 30 times in the interviews I've done, right? And so it's like they decided that this was more important to them, right? And so everyone needs to make that kind of a decision somewhere where it's like, this is what I think is more fun for me. And since I can't relax while playing Dota, it's just not in me. I'm too competitive. Then I've got, like, I had a rule for myself. I stopped playing games after 10 o'clock at night, competitive games. I'll gladly play Destiny or something where it's PvE. So I don't have to think about why I lost to someone. Right. Sometimes even Destiny, I can feel bad, like if I failed objective or something like that. But it's not as bad as like League. I lost. It's hard to go to bed on a loss. It's just so hard unless
Hmm.
you're one of those rare people who's like, I don't care about my rank. I don't care about losing. Right? There are people who can do that, and I'm just not one of them. And so I had to draw that line for myself.
Yeah, the people I game with, I've definitely become way less competitive at League over the last year, and I think that has corresponded with my professional growth at my job, where I'm like, okay, I'm spending time actually working and growing as a person, and less time working and growing on my League of Legends. But I still see that bit of my brain, that little bit animal bit of my brain, even in ARAMs, which are statistically the least competitive game mode you can play in League of Legends, maybe other than casual TFT. And we'll be on these streaks where we've lost 3 ARAM games in a row, and it's like 1 a.m. and we're like, one more, just one more. We just need to end on a win. And
Losing feels bad no matter
it
what,
does.
man. It's just
Yeah.
it's just human. Nobody likes to lose. Everybody likes to win, you know? That's why like something with like a repetitive grind is really nice. Like it's so
Hmm.
like that's why like PvE is relaxing to me. It's like you know this is gonna happen. Sometimes something out of the ordinary will happen. That's okay. You put something at a relatively medium difficulty level, you can just grind it through, and by that time you're done, you're tired, you're relaxed, your brain is churning stuff in the background or nothing at all, right? And that's what works for me. That's kind of like my sleeping pill. And sometimes
Yeah.
you can't have that. Yeah, you need something different, right?
It's sort of
Like,
like our culture's like knitting or reading a book before bed or something like that.
yeah,
It's for those types of games at least.
I still read a book before bed, by the way.
I listen
It's
to books. I'm totally
yeah.
anti-text. I do
Oh, really?
audiobooks.
Okay. I find that I imagine things much more vividly when I read.
Really?
It just goes
I've
faster. Yeah, I create a world as I'm reading.
I used to love reading as a kid. I would read all the time before bed and stuff, but I always liked I didn't listen to audiobooks growing up, but I listened to like audio adventures, like stories and stuff like that, almost like the War of the Worlds and um
Mm,
the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy audio play. I listened to those a lot, and something clicked. I guess it was in high school or something where I just stopped reading and I just kept listening. And now I just exclusively listen to things. Maybe it's just because I read so much on the computer that it's hard to
mm.
go from there and just be like, okay, I want to go and sit in bed and read a book for the next hour. But yeah,
Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah.
Okay, that was a great section, but why don't we try to get a little bit back on track and we talk about Mobalytics? So we talked a little bit already talked about how Mobalytics got started. What was the original product like compared to what it is today? What was the first thing that Mobalytics was?
The GPI circle, and here's your skills, and here's the advice on specific skills if you were above or below a certain threshold. And that was the whole product. That was it. And today we have match history, pre-game, post-game, overlay, 4 different games. So we've come a long way. Comparison, progress analysis. We have too many features, to be honest. So it's definitely evolved a lot over time. And ironically enough, we're going back right now to revisit our GPI for the third time since its inception and improve and
So
iterate. It's constant iteration.
for the lay person, what is GPA?
Oh, it's
Gold
our gamer performance index. It's
gamer
basically
performance index. Okay.
it's a way that we've taken all your data, we've analyzed it, and put it into 8 uh, major categories that have subcategories, all of them to help you identify strengths and weaknesses so we can give you better insights. So basically, if you're playing League, we look at your farming, your vision, your objectives, consistency, your versatility, your fighting, your aggression, and your survivability, right? And we try and say, okay, like within your farming, your early game farming is good, but your late game farming is shit. And so here's how we look at all of those and combine those factors to figure out how good you are.
Okay, so what were the biggest challenges that you and your team faced when going from the original product, like the GPI, to what you have now? Like, where was the struggles from in the past 5 years?
Lots of struggles. One of them was one of the things we talked about, like learning that it's not everybody wants to improve, right? Even though they think they do, it's like, and so learning not to be harsh with advice, learning to pull people through that. Let me rephrase that. Not learning that not everyone wants to put the effort to improve, but everybody wants to win now, right? And so designing stuff so it's easier for people to have a better quality experience regardless of how much time they want to invest and their skill level, right? And so just learning things that, like, we released our first post game and it had advice for people after every match. And most of the time people were making the same mistakes in their matches. And it turned out to be too generic. It's like either they were dying too much, they weren't farming enough, they weren't placing enough awards. Most of the time your losses can be attributed to one or more of those things. And so it's like, okay, I know, but like what specifically, which moment? And it's like, well, that's kind of hard because it requires a lot more data analysis and we're not there yet. So ended up scrapping that entire thing and redoing. We've redone a lot of our features several times. I think learning to focus on the value we're offering and to be cognizant, but not heavily influenced by what's going on in our market as well, like by our competitors, because we believe fundamentally that the biggest source of information is the player themselves. And we
Mhm.
always have things we can be adding to them. And so our job is never done.
I love that. I love that you mentioned like the post game information or the post game advice because it reminds me of when people will donate to like a streamer and they'll be like, "Hey, here's my op.gg. Um, what should I do like to improve this?" And like 99% of the time, the advice is stop dying as much or farm
Hmm.
better or something like that.
Yeah.
And people
Yeah.
can't take that advice uh, very well because it's just like be better at the game.
Yeah. And we have like
Okay.
specific things inside the game. And it's like you know how many times people come to our site and say, "Can you check this score? I don't think it's right. I don't think my farming is a 5 out of 100." And we say, "Okay, I'll check it for you." And we come back and we're like, "Dude, you have a CS at 10 of 30. You know that the right thing to have at 10, like the ideal thing, you should be getting 100, right? You know that, right? And so getting 30 is you almost don't have to play. So it's just like people have this. Are you familiar with Dunning-Kruger syndrome?
No, I'm not.
Okay, this is a good one. It's when you take a person playing in a group or doing any activity in a group or saying anything about themselves relative to a group, they always over-evaluate their skill level, right? So I'm doing everything really well and everyone else is doing everything poorly. Right. So a lot of people who play team games in our day and age have Dunning-Kruger syndrome where it's like, it's not my fault. And I'm doing this. I'm really good. I'm actually diamond, but everyone in my game is gold and they keep weighing me down. So I can't get out of gold. Right. Like people actually have this belief. A lot of people believe that. Right. It's my teammates.
Hmm.
And despite tons of bronze to challenger streams and all this stuff that you see out there, people really, it's the existence of elo hell, right? But it actually doesn't exist. If you've been playing for a long time, your MMR is probably where you need to be. And you're going to probably win half of your games and lose half of your games till you get better. And when you get better, you'll start to win a little more than half. But if you're much better than where you are, you win much more than half, like 10% more, like a flat 10%. And
Hmm.
that's why you'll climb very fast. But if you're slightly better, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle. And if you're not better, you probably might luckily go up to silver 1, then drop back down to silver 3. Your peak is not where you are. Your average over a long period of a time is. And if you're constantly improving, then your average keeps going up like that. But if you're not, it looks something like this,
Yeah.
right? And most people just can't understand that concept.
Yeah. All right, guys. I hate to do this. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface with you, and I'd love to maybe come back and revisit this whenever you're free again. But I know we've already gone longer than your allotted time. You're a busy guy, so we're gonna have to wind things down now. Um, earlier than I'd like to, but I mean
I
that's the world we
promised
live
my
in.
girlfriend I'd eat dinner with her at 7:30. That's one thing you don't want to.
You can't break that
So,
one.
yeah.
Yeah,
So,
so I just wanted to thank you again. It was such a great talk, and I think we have so much more that we can come back and do again. So if you have some more
yeah,
time sometime, we'll try to schedule something in the future.
I would
But
love to. I greatly enjoy talking to you. And I'm happy to, I don't know if there's any, you said there was a Q&A, but I can spend a few
yeah,
extra minutes
we'll take
and
a few
just,
minutes after the show, and
yeah,
we'll see if anyone has any
yeah,
questions. But as of
yeah,
right
sure.
now, thank you again for coming on the show. I'm so happy that you were able to come on, even if it was just for an hour and a half. And like I said, we would love to have you on in the future. If you, for some reason, don't know who Amine is, or you don't know what Mobalytics is, check out both their Twitters. I think the Mobalytics one is at Mobalytics
Don't
HQ.
check my Twitter. I don't
Don't
use it.
check. He doesn't use it very much, but I'm still
Uh,
following him. He's a great
okay.
profile picture.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna try to use Mobalytics more. I have never really been one for third party tools, but I'll check it out and I'll see if it can help me go from high gold to low platinum, and we'll see.
That's
But
awesome. Yeah.
if you love the stream, if you love Dev Dive, you can check us out on twitch.tv/Nighthawk20000 every Wednesday. If you can't catch it live and you want to watch the video, you can always check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Nighthawk20000. I'll be uploading the videos pretty much right after the show, so you can catch it that night. And if you can't watch live or on YouTube, you can always listen on Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, and more. Give us a follow and a rating on these platforms if you want. It helps the show out and it helps in discoverability. And as always, I really appreciate everyone who comes out and listens, whether it is live or at their own time. I really appreciate you guys. And if you want to talk to me, I'm always in my Discord, discord.gg/Nighthawk. I'm always happy to talk to listeners about pretty much anything. So give us a like, a follow, whatever you want to do, and I really appreciate it. You guys have an excellent evening.
Thanks for having me.